Hey there, everyone. I'm David Benites from Extreme Vocal Institute, and I'm here with my friend Ryan Kirby from Fit for a King. And I would say, how have you been doing? But I feel like I've been right next to you for like 3 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, off and on, been on this whole tour.
Yeah, more or less. It's been amazing, but nuts. How would you describe how these shows have been on this tour, like both legs of this?
I'd say it's the shows themselves, you start getting numb to the fact that there's like 2,000 to 6,000 people in the crowd, which is honestly crazy that I feel bad even saying like I'm numb to the fact that there's so many people.
But it's just every day.
It's every day, and this is such a long tour. I think 43 total shows, and it really honestly lets you loosen up a bit. This tour, I feel like I've gotten to loosen up a little bit on stage, because I always think the bigger the crowd, the easier it is to loosen up, because it's like a blob.
Yeah.
When you don't want to focus in, it's just this, and then sometimes you can focus in at individuals singing along and having fun. But when it's a giant crowd, you have the option of either focusing in or just looking at this giant sea of people that it's like almost not even real looking.
Yeah, I honestly feel the same way, because when it's like either a smaller show or a smaller crowd, it's really easy to get like kind of hung up on like one detail or another, because you can just see every little detail. But when it's just like the mass of just people and just such a big place, like places like this, we're at the new MGM Theater here in Boston, which is only a few months old. So really excited to be here today. When it's so big like that, you can just kind of let go a lot easier, for sure, and then feel some more of that flowing. And with that, you've been flowing through a lot of these new songs on stage now that the new record is out. How have things been for you guys since dropping that a few weeks ago?
I think people really are enjoying the new songs. They seem to have some of the better reactions of the night. And for me, they're definitely the biggest challenge vocally, especially. We've talked about it a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Just there's way more clean singing. There's a lot more variation in the screams, like from gutturals to mid screams to yelling to pitch yells.
Yeah, and then even this more emotional kind of screaming.
Yeah,
so it's not just like
to have
heavy.
Emotional. Yeah, like not being so hung up on the technical aspect that it loses character.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been doing a lot of work on this tour together, kind of making sure that you're able to get through all of these different new things that you've been doing kind of for the first time, because you hadn't played any of these songs live.
Nope.
Especially not this many of the new ones all together.
And I've never in my entire career had to sing this much, especially like songs like Falling Through the Sky that are 90% singing.
Yeah. But it's a cool thing when you start to be able to feel things lock in. And based on what we've been doing so far and like what you've been feeling from like the beginning of the tour to now, where we're, I think, within the last few weeks here, how do you feel about the way you've been kind of managing the material on stage now versus the beginning of the tour?
I think it's way better now. Like we worked a lot on getting the lid off and like being able to go for it. And I think it's getting easier and easier to just go for it. And I definitely can feel a difference in my singing range towards the end of the tour versus the very beginning. It was felt very limited. And even with the screams, they just feel a lot more effortless now. But even for as long as I can remember with touring, majority of the time my screams would feel better later in the tour. And people would always think it's the opposite, where they're just like, dang, that tour's long. I bet your voice is worn out. And I'm like, actually, it feels great. I kind of, like, by week 3, I'm just, like, in the zone.
And sometimes it takes a little while for, like, the body to get used to things like that again, especially since it's been a little bit since touring has been back, like, this full force because of the years off that everybody had. Would you say that out of everything, this kind of first year back that you guys have done, that this has been the most physically intense on you?
I'd say physically intense, because like our Australia tour, I barely slept, and sleeping's a big part of vocals.
Yeah, seriously.
Like maybe one of the biggest components of vocals.
Yeah, and not even just a lot of sleep, but just trying to make it as consistent as you can, which in these kinds of environments can definitely be tough.
When you're in a bandwagon, it's not the easiest to get like a solid, don't wake up night's sleep.
Yeah, like the drive from Denver to Kansas City was pretty smooth, and then other nights it's like your own personal version of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, it's like, you're just like getting thrown out and you're getting airtime.
Oh, yeah.
I do feel like, though, the tour, I feel a lot better right now as a vocalist than I ever did even when I was younger. So I was watching live videos of myself from like 2013, 2014, and I was like, dang, I sound way better now. I sound tired. The enunciation's not that great. The range is really limited. So I feel like now, like, it's a mixture of working with you and honestly, maybe the 2 years really, it was a nice kind of just relax.
Yeah, especially for so many bands, like yourselves included. Like, it was just like tour for so many years without stopping. And this was like the first break a lot of people's voices.
You don't really have time to reevaluate how you do things because you're just constantly on to the next tour.
Yeah. And it's so wild. But now that you're feeling that way, that's so great that that's the case, especially because it's rare, I think, especially from the amount of people that I've seen doing this to this many years in, kind of feel like you're at your peak. Because so often people will potentially get injured or like things will just kind of start to get tougher and tougher to do as time goes on. And you'll just hear that deterioration kind of setting in, or just people feeling honestly less enthused about what they're doing. But it seems like, especially from being a part of your camp here for the weeks that we've been doing this for, like, all of you guys are so enthusiastic about everything being done, and it really shows.
We like playing heavy music.
Yes.
So I do think some people grow out of wanting to scream all the time, and that's a preference, and I know some fans don't like it, but you can't help what a person grows up and enjoys doing. People can't force their way into enjoying something that they want to see. But we genuinely enjoy writing heavy music. I enjoy screaming and like harsh vocals. I also enjoy singing, but I'm always wanting to get better at screaming and never want to like get rid of it or cut back on.
Yeah, and that definitely shows on the record too, which is really cool. The record is called The Hell We Create, and you should all listen to it literally right after watching this video today, and listen to it front to back, because the way it flows is very, very cool and really outlines exactly what you just said, where it's being able to tap into these newer territories of really intense songwriting and just like beautiful like choruses and like flowing melodies, but at the same time not letting go of that heavy at all. And if anything, having moments that are even heavier than before. And the fact that you guys are pulling these things off simultaneously in a single set is really exciting. Are there songs that are even heavier that you're looking forward to pulling out on different tours that you might have coming up in the future?
I'd say we will finally bring Reaper out for our future tours. I'd say Reaper and Eyes Roll Back, though, are probably tied for some of the heaviest, but we always throw some older heavy songs in the set whenever we headline.
For you, what's one of the most interesting things, like, as a performer, between, like, in a single set, going from something so melodic and more intense in that way to something really heavy, like a few minutes later?
I'd say, weirdly, I still view the heavy part of the set as like a break, because screaming is what I've been doing my whole life. Singing to me is so much more difficult. It's getting easier, but I didn't start singing until I was like 26. I've been screaming since I was like 13. It wasn't good, but I started.
More time has gone by.
Yeah. So, and with singing, it's a lot more precise. Like, if you scream and there's a little too much of this in it, or it's like, it's noticeable, but it doesn't, like, it's not embarrassing or anything. Like, if there's a little too much voice in it or whatever. But if you sing and miss a note badly, it's just so obvious and it's so bad sounding, and there's very few things you can do with screaming that's gonna like make people wince.
Because like the chaos of the sound is kind of factored in. So that's definitely a really good point, especially because I end up talking with a lot of people, like, here online and like on all of our socials here, to like all the different people I work with who also either want to be combining singing into their screaming, vice versa, or people that have been doing it for a while and they start to feel a lot of that struggle. When you feel like something's maybe starting to go awry a little bit during the set, what does that kind of feel like for you in the moment? If you feel like you're gonna like miss a beat or something, or maybe miss a note?
I'd say with screaming, what I normally will feel is I'm just not getting enough distortion. I start hearing too much of my voice, like the whole like.
It starts to kind of open up too much.
It's not getting the like. More of just the.
And it's kind of sputtering.
Yeah, it's like sputtering. Which, if you're holding a mic and you muffle it enough, you can kind of get around it.
In a pinch, yeah.
But with singing, there's not a lot of like tricks. If there's times where I'll go to hit a high note and squeak, so I have to be able to remember the feeling.
Yeah.
Like if I'm like,
and you have to try to find it again.
I have to and sometimes I just remember the feeling of what it feels like when I'm about to squeak, and I just avoid it, and I'll pitch yell it. Or scream it or something, because nothing will sound worse than me just absolutely butchering a note
or full stage. Voice crack.
Yeah, full voice crack.
And that happens to everybody. I know I've had my fair share of those moments myself too. But now, especially as we're approaching the end of the second leg of this tour, which is the True Power Tour with I Prevail, Pierce the Veil, These Guys Fit for a King, and right now Stand Atlantic opening. What would you say has been the most helpful thing that's kind of gone through your head when you're on stage to kind of help you power through different parts, especially now that you're feeling so much more confident with it?
I think what I've been remembering lately is the three main things we've talked about, where one is don't overpush.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I try to overcompensate. If I'm feeling weak, I start pushing harder, but that will actually, maybe I'll get some screams out, but it will end up being a net negative by the end of the show. My voice will be dead tired at the end of the night. I might have a headache, which is because when you're super tensed up, you're going to start causing other problems. And then you're out of breath for moving around. You're out of breath for singing because you're just pushing so hard. So I keep telling myself, don't overdo it with pushing. The second one is I keep remembering, keep your knees a little bent.
That's right. We have talked about that a lot.
When you're singing, you don't have to move around.
Yeah.
Just stay super planted. Make sure you nail your notes. Don't worry about showsmanship in the moment that you're delivering a big vocal line.
Yeah. And and you make a really good point with that, especially with how dynamic your stage show is, with you guys all having the coordinated movement being so on. It's picking the moments where the chaos is there and you're running left and right and forward and backward and getting in the crowd and getting back on stage. Yeah. But then the moments where it is just planting and really getting that power that you need throughout whatever it is you're doing, and being able to balance those things can definitely be tough for people who are newer to performing. But now that you guys are really in full swing with this, it seems like the balance of these ideas is working really well.
Yeah. And there's times if there's a chorus, I don't need to do any crazy movement. Just sing the chorus as great as I can sing it. Because at the end of the day, that's what is going to impress the most people. A little extra jumping and stuff. You got to pick the moments. There's moments where you don't need that breath.
Yeah.
And you can get away with some screaming that isn't necessarily difficult. There's songs where I'm just cruising in that pocket scream.
Yeah.
And I could do that in my sleep. It's that's when you should move more.
Yeah.
It's but when you're all right, I got some big notes I got to hit right now. Just get planted, make sure you're breathing, and
bend your knees.
And bend your knees. Hey, the bending your knees does help.
It's crazy how many things that affects. But at the same time, it's still important to let yourself fully get excited about what's going on. I can imagine that you're so pumped, and all of you guys are so pumped to be performing as many of the newer songs as you are right now. Especially from how excited you've been since recording them and sitting on them and not being able to do anything with them up until the release.
You do that as well with new music.
Oh yeah, it's tough. It's definitely tough, but it ends up being so worthwhile when you can finally unveil that. And with that kind of feeling in mind, because we have talked about this a fair amount, here and there while on tour together, all of these things coming together really creates not even just the excitement for right now, but the excitement for what's to come, whether that's future tours in the next year or so, and what that's going to mean for the way that you write songs moving forward. As your voice becomes more and more flexible here, do you think that's going to start to impact the type of ideas you have?
Definitely, there's things I've thought about with choruses, and I'm I think I could do that now. And in the past, there's things I avoided because I couldn't do it, or I'd be like, that's not doable live, so I don't want to. But now there's things that are happening live where I'm like, okay, so I can be a little more flexible in the studio. So makes me excited to write more.
That's really exciting. And it's a good feeling when you can tell that you're really starting to hone your craft in a way where there aren't really limits to what you're doing in the same way that there may have been in the past. And especially with the way things are right now, where there's kind of no rules with how songwriting goes anymore. And as long as you're passionate about what you're doing and you're really giving the ideas your all, like every idea that you have can be super sick in a song, even if it's not like in the most conventional way, or like in, I'll say, like a traditional, more metal or metalcore way, like fitting that box kind of perfectly. It's cool to be able to just merge different kinds of thoughts and ideas into each other and different kinds of music the way you are, which is really, really exciting with what you're doing here. Now, with that in mind, what are you looking forward to most once the tour ends and you're able to stop vocalizing for a second?
I think what I look forward to, I'll start with the least, is figuring out ways to keep my voice warm.
Yes.
But the most is just relaxing, and it's like a double-edged sword. Like, I enjoy resting my voice because I know health-wise, it's just good to do that.
But you also love being out here and just doing this thing.
But I love when I'm out and my voice feels great to let's just keep knocking out shows. Like, can we do Europe right after this so I can keep the voice warm? And because then I'm like, oh, great, I gotta hope I can get back to where I am in Europe.
Oh, yeah. And that's definitely something we'll do a lot of, because there's so many different ways to be able to maintain the way your voice is feeling when you are home in between tours and stuff like that I think will be really helpful. And before we wrap up here, one of the biggest things I wanted to ask to close things out is, to people that are starting to really explore their voices and try to find new territory, but they don't quite know where they're going yet, because you've gone through so much of this journey with writing songs that are more like deeply meaningful to you and touching into really intense topics and really letting that reflect in the dynamics of the kinds of vocals you've been thinking of for these songs. What's like the one thing you would say to people out there trying to do the same thing that haven't found that voice yet?
I would say take inspiration, but don't rely too, like, I'm trying to word it, because I think this is better to word it this way. When I was growing up, I tried really, really hard to sound like other vocalists. I was like, I really want the lows of Phil Bozeman, with the like yell emotional stuff of Spencer Chamberlain, with the the intensity of Jeremy McKinnon, and I tried to do all this, and I got absolutely nowhere as a vocalist. I really started progressing when I took inspiration from them, but did it in what was comfortable for me. Because I think when you're trying to like be another person completely, especially when you're trying to be 5 incredible vocalists and once, I'm like, not even time. These guys can be all of these guys. They're all their own person. And I think a lot of people grow up trying to like Frankenstein their perfect vocalist. Not realizing each of those vocalists completely different techniques. Their builds are different as just a person. Everything about it can be different. And it's like, so I think taking inspiration, but understanding like what technique is working best for you. And because like we've talked about, I use a technique that's not like super common for like lower screams.
Correct.
And there are other people that use it, but it's typically like a false chord type vocal, but I'm using fry. And instead of like saying, all right, let's stop doing fries completely, because I think insert insane false chord deathcore vocalist, it's like, no, I'd rather just find a way to like get as close to that as I can while still being me. And that's one of the best, and you're right, that's one of the best things you can do, just making sure you are allowing yourself to sound like you first, and then seeing where the wiggle room is after that. And I think that's something that a lot of people can take away from. And I'm excited to see what this kind of expansion on what these barriers on things are going to be, and how they're going to kind of disappear over time as we continue to do more tours together, and what things are going to look like as you continue through this new album cycle for The Hell We Create, and what that's going to look like for future music looking forward. But with that in mind, that's all the time we have for now. And if you enjoyed this video,
definitely subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up as well, and comment what kinds of videos you want to see next or any other questions you have, because I'm sure we're going to be spending a bunch more time together too. But on that note, I'm David Benites. This is Ryan Kirby from Fit for a King. I'm from Extreme Vocal Institute, and I'm sure we'll see you guys real soon.